Right, we'll make a start. So first of all, thanks very much for coming, everybody. I know how many other pressures there is on your time, so I really do appreciate you giving up some of your evening, including some of your course directors as well, has given up some of his time as well. So first of all, thanks very much for coming. So this is the fifth and final talk of this year's series. I'm certainly looking forward to getting to the end, and I'm hoping that I've saved the best until last. No pressure on Matt. Okay, so you've probably all heard this before, but I'll better say this because this is the first time Matt's heard it. So a little bit of an introduction to me. So I'm Ian Durbin. I've been a visiting professor at UCL for the last 8 or 9 years. I can't quite remember. I'm associated with the MEng course, Engineering and Architectural Design. My role there really is to help to continue it be as successful as it is. So first of all, I'm old, so I've been around for a long time. I've had a 35-year career in consulting engineering, MEP consulting engineering, and when you get to the end of that, you realise you've got a bit of wisdom. So I feel as though I have some wisdom which I'd like to try and pass on to the rest of the, to the next generation, as it were. And of course, it's not just my wisdom, it's the wisdom of other people in the industry like me, of which Matt is one of. And I think it's very important that you hear lots of different pockets of wisdom, so not just engineers and architects, but also planners and daylighting specialists and clients even. So, you know, that's the purpose of this set of talks, really. And the thinking behind all of this is how can we turn that, how can we capture that wisdom, and how can we pass it on? So that's really what the talk's about. What the series is about. So this is the fifth, as I say. Hopefully some of you have heard all of the others. They're certainly all available at some stage online, so they'll be downloadable. And we've had a rich sort of cross-section of various people's views, and we've had some really good Q&A sessions as a result of all of those things as well. So just a quick recap as to what we're trying to achieve from this. It's trying to get you a slice of what the real world is like in the built environment rather than the academic view of it, which of course is what you're seeing through your course. But first and foremost, to encourage you into this industry, because I say this every time, you know, I've probably enjoyed almost every day. Well, I have enjoyed almost every day of my career. It's been really, really great, and I would absolutely urge the built environment industry to you. But also it's about becoming effective, and by that I mean not just knowing what to do, but actually the hard bit is to actually implement what needs to be done as well. And I think if this wisdom, if we can pass on some of this wisdom to you, I think you will be able to be as effective as you can be, as soon as you can be, which of course is what we're here to try and achieve. So before I introduce Matt, I just wanted to put your hands up. Those students in the room who are interested in going into joining a career in or following a career in the construction industry, could you raise your hands? So lots of relevant people in the audience, Matt, for you to reach out to, which is great. So I'm lucky enough to know I've known Matt for about 30 years. His career has gone from manufacturing through to contracting, through to MEP consulting, through to senior leadership. And the one thing I would say about Matt is almost from the very first time I met him, it's obvious that he's never satisfied with the status quo. He always wants to, what I would call, tinker with the engine, or what he would call make it better. And that's Matt through and through, I think. But also I would say that he's also got some baked in fairness, and he's a true leader. So there aren't many of those, and we are lucky enough to have one of them in the room tonight. And the other thing that I would say that's writ through Matt is his desire to make the industry, and by that I mean everything in the industry, from how the industry works, how it's represented, what it does, how it engages with clients, etc. But also in terms of the creation of the next set of people who come in. He's very interested in all that, which is, of course, why he's so keen to have come along tonight. And he has some significant wisdom, going back to my first slide, some significant wisdom to offer. And I would repeat what I say on all of the introductions here, is that some of this is all very subtle. It's not like we're going to put up an equation and you're going to remember the equation and the learning is gone through. The learning is done. It's a lot more subtle than that. So I would urge you to pay attention to what Matt's saying, and you will hopefully get a lot out of it. So I'll be comparing. So any questions at any stage, if Matt says anything you're not familiar with or you don't really understand, ask a question and we'll stop. But equally, at the end, we're hopefully going to have another rich Q&A session at the end of the session. So that's it. Without saying anything else, I'll pass you over to Matt.
The first slide's failed.
Sorry?
First slide, it's not back in there. There's supposed to be something on there, I don't know why it's not there, but yeah, it's there on my one. Thanks for having me. Thank you, Ian, for some kind words. I'll see if I can live up to some of them. So, firstly, a little bit about me. My name's Matt Jones. I'm Director of Operations and Projects at Hoare Lea, which means I get the dubious pleasure of everything that's operational, so looks outwards into the construction industry, falls under my purview. That's not to say I know what's going on. I don't. But issues bubble up to me, and it's a tough role, but it's quite a privilege for me to have that role, to try and influence Hoare Lea, which hopefully can influence a wider market. So just a little bit about me. So you've got some perspective of where my perspectives come from. So I left school at 16. My parents wouldn't let me go to college because I was so painfully shy. They felt education would not bring me out myself. So they forced me, and they say forced me, it wasn't quite like that, but I started a trade apprenticeship at a big car manufacturing firm in 1986. And if you want to go back and work out what that was like, watch a few sitcoms from the mid-80s. It was a pretty tough place to be, and I worked out pretty quickly, even though I was doing an engineering trade and my role was all about engineering, how you got on was about how you interacted with the people there. So even though I went in shy, I wasn't shy for very long because, yeah, you have to engage with people. And I learned that probably my first lesson. I stayed there for a little while, then I went back into education. I did a HND in electrical engineering. I then left and secured a role / blagged my role into working for a food company where I assembled a load of bits of disparate machine into a production line. It was a temporary contract. The day I left, they phoned me about 2 hours later to say, oh, we've just worked out, nobody knows what you've done. So could you come back and look after it? So I stayed there, and it was sort of the end of the tail end of the recession in the mid-90s. I stayed there for a couple of years. Then I went travelling. Again, probably one of the best things I've done in terms of my career now. Broadened my horizons, put me in loads of situations I wasn't comfortable with, but hugely enjoyable. I went around the world for 2 years. I ended up in another role that I sort of fell into / blagged my way into, which was my first role in construction on the new airport in Hong Kong. I got a job for a Chinese design and build contractor. And again, to say that was a sort of a baptism of fire into the construction industry was a bit of an understatement. I didn't have a clue what I was doing. I didn't understand the industry. Words like specification, and I just didn't know what they meant. I lasted about 8 weeks, but I'd worked out that's what I want to do for a career. So I came back. I got a job for a small consultancy in Bristol. I stayed there for about 6 years. Worked out there's two sides to the industry. There's the design side and then there's the contracting side, and I only knew a little bit about one side. So I went and worked for a contractor for 5 years. Didn't really enjoy it. I'll come on to a bit of that later on. But gave me a real understanding of how the industry works from sort of one side to the other. So it was an invaluable experience. While I was there, I did a job called Dingles at the Christmas party. I sat next to Mr. Durbin. And it says in my little notes, he's been grooming me ever since. But I'm not sure.
You can't say
I'm
that.
not sure.
You'll have to edit that out.
Okay, so a little bit about. I should firstly, if anybody wants to stop me, please just stop me. This is not going to be a presentation that's heavy on detail. It's going to be more of a conversation. So just in terms, this is my career advice to you. I don't know if some of you know that song Sunscreen by Baz Luhrmann. Some of it is a little bit me just imparting some advice, how I've operated, how I would advise you operate. There's some industry observations, because I think ever more those two things are intersecting with each other. Applying the process is now maybe not as successful as it used to be 30 years ago, and I'll try and come on to that in a little bit. And there's some takeaways for the year, if you want, for your first year, in terms of how you might want to start. These are not formal findings, this is not evidence, this is not industry accepted practice. They're sort of my views. Ian's encouraged me to be honest. I've got a bit of a reputation for being occasionally overly honest.
I wouldn't necessarily sit in the front row.
Yeah. So they're my personal views. You know, they're not necessarily the views of Hoare Lea, Tetra Tech, or any of our subsidiaries. This is very much a personal. I think I'd say most of this to everybody. I might moderate certain bits for certain audiences, but you're going to get the full warts and all.
That's what we've been waiting for.
So, in terms of advice, I started thinking about if I was to advise you how to operate in your career, and the first thing I sort of worked out was, what does that mean? What does a career mean in construction? Because it can mean lots of different things for different people. I've worked with lots of people who aspire to be very technical. I've worked with people who are very single-minded in their pursuit of money. I've worked with people who sort of desire the creation of things. They want to walk away from buildings with a sense of place and pride. And I never thought about any of that. I just sort of stumbled into it and did one challenge followed by the next. And I've reflected on that, and I'm not sure that's... It worked for me, it was an approach. I'm not sure it was the most effective approach. And it relates to some of the stuff I'm going to say a bit later on in terms of personality. So I guess I just urge you to think about that. What sort of career do you want in construction? I'll go on later. It's an amazing industry and a challenging industry, and the experiences can be very different in different spaces, very variable. And I appreciate it's probably quite early to challenge you on things like that, but it's something I'd start exploring. I'm not saying we should need to get to an answer and say, I want to be this, doing this, but to have some sort of understanding of actually what really gets you excited, and then think about that and explore that. I wish I'd done that. I sort of stumbled into things and went, you know, from serendipitous moment to next serendipitous moment. But yeah, so that's my sort of first takeaway lesson. My second lesson, I knew an architect called David Martin, an American guy, worked for a firm called Stantec. David probably synthesised this piece of advice for me about midway through my career. I'd like to say David saw something in me that he really liked, but thought, ooh, maybe he's a bit of an argumentative twat, but he's got something. He's got something. He's on the right course, but he could make his life and ours quite a bit easier. So David said, look, Matt, you should focus on working out what the problem is and focusing on solving that, and don't worry about winning the argument. Construction is a sector that is, and again I'll come on to this a bit later, is sort of set up to put people in conflict with each other, to set up an argument. And it's very tempting and quite enjoyable occasionally to get seduced into that and come away thinking, yeah, you know, I've won the argument, I've proved how smart I am. It might work in the short term, but in my experience, it won't really work in the long run. And you know, probably my more combative earlier years came from maybe a sense of a bit of an imposter syndrome, which I would say, if at some stage you haven't got that, you're doing something wrong. And trust me, absolutely everybody has that. I was talking to Justin Spencer, who's the one person that sits above me at Hoare Lea, and he'll be the first to say, I'm sort of making this up every day. I've not really, you know, not really got a rule book for any of this. He feels that sense of imposter syndrome massively, as do I. Yeah, so the other thing is, I think when you stop focusing on winning the argument and proving the point, and you start to focus on the outcome, you'll find that you get better results, you have fewer battles, the room's a bit nicer, and you'll start to build a reputation that you'll get invited into places, because those around you see you as somebody they want in the room because they're going to solve the problem, which when you juxtapose that to that angry bloke who just used to shout at us and tell you everything was wrong, you know, for a career, you're definitely better off going for the problem. It looks like, sometimes winning the argument looks like the short-term path, but it generally never is. The next bit of advice, and apologies for the football reference, so hands up who gets it. So Pep Guardiola used to play for Barcelona, was really good as a player and really good as a manager. And I'm trying to use that to draw the distinction. There's a start of your career and then the end of your career that I'm in, and then there's a bit in the middle. In the start of your career, it's much more about doing what you're asked to do very well. At the end of your career, as I've tried to put it on there, it's about getting others to do what you ask. So those two things are like polar opposites. At the start of your career, you're generally in charge of one person. You have total agency on how you operate. At the end of your career, I think I've got 950 people that work directly for me. I can't really get them to do anything other than my influence. We can pull some levers around, you know, don't do this, do that. We can incentivise in some ways. But I'm totally reliant on those 950 people doing my ask, which I juxtaposed when I started working for Ian. My sole job was to do what Ian asked me to do as well as I could. And they're the two easy bits. Because in the middle, you've got a mixture of both. And you sort of transform from one to the other. And that transformation, that middle bit, starts from about 6 months out in my experience. And you'll go, in a day, you might go from being in one meeting where you have to respond in this way, 20 minutes later, you're in this mode. So getting some understanding of that, I think, starts to take you down this path where people and how people work together and systems, you start to appreciate they're the bits that make construction work. Because you can only do tasks on your own. To get buildings built, it takes a whole system of people. And your effectiveness is generally based on that whole system of people. This was about 20-30 minutes. I should have checked that at the time.
That's fine. That's fine. We've locked the door, nobody's leaving.
Okay. Oops. Yeah, so early career, execute as well as you can. Later career, it's all about influence. And again, just some understanding of that going in, I think, might really, really help you. one of the things that's really, I think, nourished, sustained, powered my career, and Ian mentioned it earlier in his very kind sort of synopsis, is I've got a really strong view that for a successful career you need to build momentum, slow and steady momentum around a set of values or a set of behaviours, a brand almost of what you stand for and what you do. It's very that's a long game though. It takes a long time to build that reputation. Phil Knight, who founded Nike, which number is it? This is possibly one of my other favourite takeaways. If we do enough right things, we'll make money automatically. And that's almost the maxim on which I try and lead the ops in Hoare Lea. That every time it's about making the right decision, irrespective of the short-term consequences of that. Because that will build that momentum that I think really sustains you. So I'd certainly advise bearing that in mind. It's not very popular because it feels like the long way round to a career, but from where I am now, I don't think it is. I think it's the shortcut. So just build slow and steady momentum around the things and the values that you hold, and I think that will really sustain you. And it's really authentic, and it's really sustainable for you because you're not trying to do something that somebody else wants to do. You're not trying to be something that you're not. You're just turning up as yourself, doing what you think's right. And if you do it for long enough and it's in the right area, it will sustain you. It will get you in the room. It will help build that reputation for you. So I've come to this quite late. As I say, I perhaps didn't have a classic career in construction, but Ian probably had a more standard career than I, and so it probably wasn't a huge factor in Ian's career. I observe lots of other peer organisations, contracting firms, architects, etc., etc. And we've come to this quite late as Hoare Lea, but the sort of psychology of who you are, how you're going to behave. Construction is a very varied industry. There's lots of personalities, lots of neurodiversity. If I was to be slightly unfair, it goes from sort of cape-wearing architect with a huge ego, psychotic site agents, sort of neurodiverse engineers in the middle. To say that the industry can be a mixed bag of personalities and how people you can bump into is something of an understatement. So I sort of look back and I reflect on, I'd never spent any time trying to understand what pushed my buttons, what didn't push my buttons, where was I good, where was I not good. I didn't spend any time really trying to understand my sort of personal psychological makeup and what made me tick. I never spent any time educating myself on what other people might make them tick. I think I had a bit of a natural feel for it, and I think I was quite good at influencing the room. But I think I would have been way, way more influential earlier, and I think this goes for most people I've met in the industry, had they spent more time investing in those things that are seen as very outside the industry. So I would say sort of psychology, it's not about therapy or anything like that, it's just about how human people interact together and how you're going to act together. And in an industry that is all about bringing people together and getting stuff done, that still strikes me as a massive missing piece of lots of people's career. So I'm not saying you need to go away and do a degree in it, but I think it is fairly straightforward. There are a few different... Over a weekend you would probably educate yourself to work out, okay, that kind of interests me, I'm gonna dig into that a little bit more. Focus focusing on outcomes is everything in terms of where we're going. So arming yourself to deliver outcomes in a more effective way would seem like a sensible step to me. I'm going to play a video in a minute. I'm not sure where it's going to work. We didn't test that. Apologies for the terrible Pride and Prejudice variation. That's off Amazon. This is about sort of trust and honesty. I think trust, we could debate whether trust is in pretty short supply in the construction industry. I've got a suspicion in great parts it is in short supply, and I think that's a shame. I think trust is critically important. I think across 25 years of my time at the firm, I've generally always tried to do the right thing, as I've said before, and I've generally always tried to see it from other people's perspective. That's allowed people to trust my motives. And in my role now, where I'm trying to influence people, I often find sometimes I can't articulate or I can't illuminate for them what the issue is. But with a really strong history of trust, I think people will often do what you ask them to do, maybe without fully understanding why you're asking them to do it. I don't really know how I'd operate at Hoare Lea unless I'd built that up. So I think that is absolutely critical. I think, I don't want to say telling the truth is a maxim, because it would imply that there is lying in the construction industry or mistruths, if you like. I don't want to go that far and say that that is rife. But there's a lot of times where you think, I'm not sure that's entirely true. There's a lot of situations that are adapted or changed for individual companies' perspectives. And that's really, really tempting in the moment. It's really, really tempting, and I'm not saying I've never done it, to get over a situation, loads of design situations, loads of contractual situations, personal situations, very, very tempting. In my experience, you're probably better off resisting the temptation and going with the more difficult. It will be harder in the moment, but I don't know how you'll sustain and have an enduring career unless you build up the reputation of that. And I can't tell you how many times a week I benefit from that. Both in Hoare Lea, in situations in our internal operations, and out with clients and on projects. So that seems like a very unconstruction-like thing, and probably just a maxim for life. But I think the way construction is, it will put pressures on you. It will put you in situations where it feels like that would be the easier way through it. And I'm not saying don't ever do it, because there might be a moment where that might be the right answer. But I think generally, integrity is in short supply. And if you can build a career with that as a real core tenet, I don't think that'll do you any harm. So they're I had about 50 of these. I could have gone on for hours, but they're the ones I picked out for you. I'm going to see if this works. Oh, actually, I might just, how do I escape this? I just wanted to show you a video because I think it serves to illustrate a point, if I can find where it is.
The humble honeybee, an expert engineer, driven by their senses. Life is sown by senses, emotions, memories. And memories, well, they are made in places like this, by our own meander down a path, lined with floral scent, through a garden that hints at something special. Spaces designed for human sense just make sense. Welcome then. Welcome to the Welcome Building. A sensory discovery. A space made for making memories of earthly reconnection. The building, a stepping stone. A loving link forged between visitor and nature. Protect this place of heritage. Stylize sustainable solutions. Pillars that rooted the design of this remarkable space. For it is a structural forest in which we wander, enveloped by water. Woodland air weaves through concealed grills. Leaf-like veins are the lifeblood of the building. But it hides, fits into secret spaces, engineering sunk into spines, where so many would create complexity. This is the magic that makes the place function. So, what does Europe's biggest garden have to say? Well, its message is clear, reflected by this building at every angle and in every way. You are welcome here, and here to stay. Let's talk, let's touch, let's learn, let's play. For no one visit will be the same as another. An abundance of life, sewn together by our senses, human-centric, planet-conscious, for connection, curiosity and community. What else could we give the next generation but a garden?
Right, I love that video, and as an engineer of however many years, it's a very unengineering thing to do. I'm just trying to find my slides again. So it's fair to say I absolutely love the construction industry. I've had an amazing career that I never thought I would have. I've loved my career at Hoare Lea, what we've got to be a part of. But I don't love it all. I don't love all of the construction industry. And the reason I've showed that video is because it's quite an emotional thing, it's quite inspiring. It's like, oh, what an amazing project. The fact that we had an in-house poet, who knew an engineering firm had an in-house poet. He's not employed to do that, he just does that. The scale of what the construction industry does, the complexity of some of the challenges are unbelievable. And you're absolutely doing the right thing by getting into a career in construction. And all firms will make videos like that. Not as good as ours, but videos like that. And they're great and they're emotional and they're inspiring. But no one ever talks about the messy underbelly of the industry. So it's very good at showing you Terminal 5 and amazing buildings and saying, what an amazing job. There are amazing clients, amazing teams, amazing projects out there. But the construction industry, in my view, and this is where the sort of talk begins to get a bit more real, in my view, is almost a broken model now. It goes back 30, 40 years. It reflects an industry that was orders of magnitude less complex than ours, where the contractual relationships were so much straightforward, the flow of information was so much straightforward. And I have a view that I'd be happy to debate with anybody really, that if it's not at the end of its life as a standard model, it's close to it. And it puts people in a really, really difficult position. there are some very uncomfortable truths about the construction industry, the commercial pressure, the pressure on us as individuals. We don't talk about that in the promotional videos. And they're the things that you're going to bump into. And you will be pleased to know these are the things that our generation has left you with as unsolved problems. So we set up conflict, we bring in commercial pressures, buildings are a success mainly because of the people working on them, not because of the way the system is set up. If anything, the system undermines or creates ever such a lot of issues for us. And that's going to be a challenge that you're going to face, and I'd love to be able to say that the industry is on top of an answer. I don't think it is. That's not to say there aren't some great clients. There aren't some brilliant clients that understand all this and are really invested. There aren't some brilliant organisations that understand all this and are really, really working hard to resolve it. Again, picking up some of the more personal advice. If you know what you want to do, and you understand yourself, and you understand what you want to achieve, it might make sense to start to look into those areas. If you're a very commercial animal, and what gets you up in the morning is, you're going to go toe to toe on the next negotiation, there are parts of the industry where you fill your boots. You can have a field day with that. Similarly, there are other parts of the industry where it is softer and more agreeable. Personally, this was a great job. It was with RHS, the Royal Horticultural Society up in Bridgewater. It was obviously going to be a nice job. The objectives that were what the building was trying to achieve was very clearly defined. It wasn't really about money. There was no commercial considerations. Obviously, it needed to be done to a price, but that wasn't what was driving it. So projects like that tend to be, if you're that way inclined, much more enjoyable. That would be a much more me sort of project than developing 1,000 flats in central London, which is going to be at the other end of that, and much closer to the part of the industry that just doesn't work anymore. So I've got no great answers to that other than we're trying to solve it, but it's very difficult. As an indication, contracts are most of the industry is still quite adversarial and quite risk heavy. Going back to being honest about things, I've particularly pulled out carbon because it's a real bugbear of mine. I've probably been in hours and hours and hours and hours to talk about carbon. Whereas if I was choosing to be emotive, I could say for all of the talk, for all of the PR and all of the waffle, nobody cares about carbon in construction. And if they did care, or they do care, I should change my, they do care, they just care about time and money more. So if they could deliver on quite an important subject, i.e. the sort of planet that we leave and our part in what we can do with that, if they could get that, if the industry could get that for no more money and no more time, it's 100% behind it. But that occurs very, very rarely in projects. It will feature as design requirements, it will feature in sort of secondary information, but it will never be a primary driver. Unless in the rare occasion, so I should check the language, it's not never, but the majority of contracts are still around time and money. And again, I just sort of advise you to go in with your eyes open and sort of join the fight. Ian said around, part of my driver is trying to make things better, trying to open people's eyes to, do we have to do it this way? Can we not do it a different way? There is a growing, I guess, or a fairly large group of people that will try and do that. but they're not as numerous as you'd like to think, and they're not having as much influence as you'd like to think. So, in terms of practical steps for you, and I guess I'm sort of rounding up, I'm well over my 20 minutes. Advising you directly, what would I say? I'd say master a technical area. That'll give you credibility. Understand what success looks like for you. Keep that in your mind at all times. Be curious about adjacencies, things like the psychology, how you communicate, negotiating, things like that will stand you in really, really good stead. Invest in how you can influence others. You are going to need that a lot more than you think. Think about these sort of career accelerants. Focus on outcomes. Focus on how you measure outcomes. Yeah, I think that's probably my advice.
Brilliant. Thanks very much. Thank you, Matt. Quick round of applause. Well, I've written down loads and loads and loads of questions.
Oh, excellent.
So,
thank you.
If nobody else asks anything, we're here for the night. So that's a really good sort of grounding of the industry, your personal view on the industry, which hopefully has sort of got lots of questions from the audience. So ask away, audience. Who wants to go first?
So you say that you think that the sort of construction model is coming to the end of its lifetime, sort of. What do you see happening as the industry breaking? Like, what's your measure for? Okay, now it's broken.
Good question.
Yeah, good question. So I'd say a number of things are happening. So in no particular order, it's more and more difficult to get people into the industry. So we're constantly undersubscribed now. We can't solve the problems that we've got because we just don't have enough people to do it. If we could get the people, we would struggle to get money to pay the people from the clients because they don't value it. I think there are all sorts of reputational things that are creeping in. You know, Grenfell is a really good example of the construction industry not working. So Grenfell is a perfect illustration of some of the things I was talking about. The only thing more depressing than Grenfell is the response to it from Hackett. Because I don't think, going back to one of my slides around what's the problem, I don't think it solved the problem. It's just done more of the same. It's put more governance in place to try and stop things happening. But actually the reason that happened was money. But there wasn't enough money in the contract. And that's the reason why a lot of things happen. So I don't know what the moment will be. It will probably be a dripping of clients moving from a reputationally challenging place where it's got a bit of toxicity, and one by one coming to the conclusion we don't want to do it like this anymore. It will require, I think, organisations to be vocal about saying we don't have to do it like this. There is a different way. We can do it a different way. So I don't think there will be a moment. I think there'll probably be a series of events, a bit of a stampede into another direction, but ultimately it will be, once that new way is set up, I'm confident it will prove to be more successful, more commercially successful, and then all the other clients will flip. Not because it's the right thing to do, but because it looks like they'll make more money from it, and it's more sustainable, and you get better answers.
Is the just to follow up on that, do you see people like SIBSI or REBA or UK government, are they? No. So actually, I've only ever written to UK government once, and that was about 6 months ago when I wrote to Pat McFadden
to say you've got this all wrong.
Did you get a response?
Yeah, I did get a response.
All
Yeah. I think it said, "Thanks for your note. We filed it under B1N." It was like, yeah, that'll be passed on. But the government are the worst. The procurement is so misplaced, and I think a lot of it comes. Ian will have heard me say, but when I started the industry, what we did as engineers was pretty straightforward. It was all technical. I think Ian was much more senior than me. Ian would have had a good understanding of everything that we did at Hoare Lea back in 2005. I've probably got the most privileged balcony view of our business. I see most things. I reckon I understand 20% of what we do. And that's in an organisation that I'm largely involved with and I've been with for 25 years. I just cannot keep track with the complexity, the modelling, the digitisation, the BIM, the intelligence, the complexity, the overlapping design considerations. It's just massively complex. And so I don't know what we do in our own company, how a client thinks he knows what questions to ask us and 30 other consultants is ludicrous. So, again, I think when I started, clients were pretty good. They understood most things. They could ask you a question and your job was to answer it. I don't think clients have got a clue what to ask anymore.
And is
I
that
think
because
they know the very end outcome, but they can't synthesise that into... Not some can, but there's a big group in the middle. Government can't. So I think that there is a big problem with just the model being set up for something that could be drawn, could be typed, could be printed by hand and sent out. We're using the same model. I used to have when I started my first job back, we used to have a print machine where you fed a print in, and you got a print out. You folded that print, you fed another one in, you folded it out. So on a Friday afternoon when I was issuing a job, if I had 30 drawings, I'd be really careful who I sent that information to because I knew I had to print it. And I wanted to go down the pub. So if I thought, well, does the landscape architect need to see the plant room layout? No, he doesn't need to see that. So I won't print in that drawing. I juxtapose that to today, where we might have had 30 drawings, now we might have 3,000 drawings. And because of technology, we might send those 3,000 drawings to 100 people. Because we can, because technology enables that. But my point is, our ability to generate information has gone exponential. Our ability to take on information is exactly the same as it was back then. And that's part of the issue, is that nobody's dealing with that unread information. For all of the AI, for all of the digitisation, for all of the BIM, I'm not convinced more straightforward jobs wouldn't be better served doing it the old way. And I think it illustrates this gap that clients have got in their knowledge. And they're effectively the influencers and leaders of the industry. Yeah, that's a very long answer.
No, that's a good answer. Any other questions?
When you said that we have to make right decisions,
Yeah.
that we will get the ill outcomes in the long term.
Yeah.
But still we have some short-term consequences related to that.
Yeah.
So how do you tackle that so that you are on the same page till you achieve that results at the end?
There's a healthy dose of judgment in there, I think. I think it's, it's really, in the moment, it's a difficult decision, it's a difficult choice to make. I think it sort of goes back to understanding what the real problem is, though. What is the question that's really being asked? And I think in a percentage, I want to say 50% of the questions that you get asked, I think now I'm at a stage in my career where I can go, I'm not sure that's actually what you're asking me to do. I think your problem is somewhere else, and it manifests here, but I don't think you want me to solve here. I think you want me to solve up here. So I think it's a skill that's learned. I think being aware of it really helps. Just be challenging. You know, what are they asking me to do? What is the right decision to make at this moment? So I think you can very politely, respectfully challenge. I think most professionals would welcome that. It comes with a bit of risk, I guess, depending on, you know, going back to the psychology piece. There might be some people, don't bother challenging them. You're never going to get past them early in your career. He just wants an answer, so just provide him the answer. Yeah, so I think it's very difficult to put myself in the exact situation, but I was just trying to think of an example. Yeah, but I think it's about awareness, really, just carrying that awareness with you that clients want problem solvers. They'll say they want answers, but they probably want their problem solved. I'm not very happy with that answer. I might want to think about that and email you.
No, that's fine. Next question.
What soft skills do you think you should learn during that time?
Soft skills. Well, I think I've touched on some of them. I think definitely the people issue. I think the influence. I mean, influencing would be a big category. The way you might want to choose that, as I said, you know, I could see that getting some awareness and some skills around negotiating, as I say, around psychology, around understanding personality types, understanding, you know, being able to go in a room. And I think I mentioned that, I think I've been quite fortunate in that I've had a general, I've got quite an affinity with being able to go, I think I can read this room. Then applying, if you can do that and then apply, or if you can teach yourself how to do that, because I don't think it's that difficult, and then applying a few simple tactics around, I'm not going to challenge that person personally. That's a really good example. I've just come from a meeting where we've got a particularly driven, what I would call red type leader, quite an alpha male, doesn't like to be challenged in the room. Does not like to be challenged in the room. You know, so you get involved in a conversation and then you have to step in and sort of say, right, look, you've got to stop arguing with each other. It's not helpful for the meeting. You're both not doing yourself any favours. The guy that responded would have been better understanding this is not the right moment to react. I can take this out of the meeting with the other person. The other person would have been better knowing this is not the right moment to challenge. We could take this out of the room. The meeting would have been better. Neither of them would have lost any capital. They would have probably gone outside the room, dealt with it, formed a bit more of a relationship, formed a bit more trust with each other. As it is, we've almost got the negative of, we've got the worst of all worlds. Not because they're all not well-meaning, but you know, that was literally 3 hours ago, and that's because either they understand how to do it but just lost their discipline, or they didn't know how to do it. But I was sat there thinking, you know, within 5 seconds thinking, oh, this is gonna go south. You know, this is James Ford and Rob Mitchell. You know, and I see that all the time in construction. People, and there's just an easier way. So, yeah, psychology, negotiating, basic people skills. I think you can learn a lot. And this is a bit more direct. You will probably get taught this wherever you land.
I was going to ask that. Do you actually get? Does any of your course matter cover that area, those areas?
Some notes. I'm also first year, so.
Oh,
Yeah.
Not yet.
I don't know at what stage in my career.
I mean, it certainly wasn't taught when I was at university, but then a lot of things weren't.
No. Today, how much of my job is about technical, 5%, how much is about 95%. When I was active on projects, how much was technical and how much was being able to influence and get people on board. We could maybe debate it between maybe 50-50 or 40-60 or 60-40. But it's really, really critical.
I think
quite
the
quickly.
way you started, you said about, I can't remember the exact words you used, but it was about technical excellence at the start of your career and then influence at the other end. And I get that, and I guess that might be obvious to you or it might not be. But these people are going to start, you know, their first year or two into their careers as technical excellence. But I think what you're saying, and that chimes with quite a lot of what the other talkers said as well, is that you can't forget the influence bit. And the earlier you latch on and begin to understand that, the more impact it will have on your career. And you know, sorry, Matt. What this is all about is to try and make you as effective as you can be, as early as you can be. So it is easy to think all I need to do is put my head down and be really good at calculations and drawings and whatever it is. But all I think we are saying, and many of the other speakers would have said, is yes, do that, but also have one eye on how you can dial up your influence skills as well. And that's about understanding how people work. And you know, as all of our talkers have said, construction is a people business. So it's about being able to communicate with people. And the earlier you latch onto that, the better, I think.
Yeah, when you join as a graduate, you're going to get 8 weeks where you can pretty much do anything you want. No one's going to judge you by it. But by week 12, whoever you're working for is starting to form an opinion of you. So I'd absolutely advocate being able to hack that person as soon as you can, knowing who's looking at your work, giving you your tasks, and thinking, I've got you figured out. I know what's going to push your buttons, what's going to piss you off, what you're looking for. Being able to read that really early is going to start your career. So I would start it now. I would start to think about it because I think it happens a lot sooner than you think it does. It's not about being in a position of influence on a project. Your influence will start a lot earlier. In the first part of your career, it's all about you. You know, you're trying to get them to think good of you, to present yourself in the best light. So that's really, really good for you. But that same skill, when you're on the other side, when you're trying to get people to do what you ask, will also be really, really useful.
Next question. Any other questions?
You talked also a bit about how clients usually view decarbonization of the business.
Yeah.
And that their main focus, like, unfortunately, still remains on
Yeah.
to be as fast as possible and to not lose more money. Because there's this change in the industry, and personally, I'm more interested in sustainability of the built environment. How do you proceed as a consultant? Who's usually very dependent on what the client wants, but you also, I assume from your company, want to go towards sustainable building, goes towards decarbonization and more innovative ways of designing.
So we're I don't want to say it's a little bit of sustainability up to now, and this might get slightly edgy, and again, I'll reiterate my disclaimer, these are my views and not necessarily those of Hoare Lea. We, as an industry, have been trying to win a sustainability argument when that's not the question that we're being asked. So sustainability has generally been driven by people who are interested in sustainability. So they've been interested in reducing carbon, they've been interested in doing all the right things, they're passionate about it, they're amazing people who have come up with great ideas, and then they pitch that to a client, assuming the client cares. And I think that's been the problem. And I think actually, in some sort of weird, perverse way, having people who are passionate about sustainability were the worst people to have a conversation with clients, because the client never really wanted to have a conversation about sustainability. we needed to trick them in the early years into doing the right thing for the right reasons. I'm not sure I've landed that well, but
no, to be fair, I think Anna said, I don't know whether you were at Anna's talk earlier on, but she said broadly the same.
Yeah.
It's about trying to use all your skill set to influence a client who might not necessarily want to take the first answer. It's about finding a way in. As it were.
I think so. I mean, if I and I'm conscious, I'm trying not to say win the argument with sustainability, because I've made a big play about not winning the argument. But I think the two things are sort of the same. I think if we've done 100 sustainability pitches, I'd say 100 really majored on sustainability. If we'd done 50 on sustainability and 50 on why this is the right thing for you and it's going to make you money, Mr. Client. Oh, and by the way, we're doing all the really, look at all this extra stuff you get for sustainability for nothing, but you're going to make more money and your reputation and your corporate identity is going to be enhanced. They would have all said yes. But we just never said that to them. We said, this is all about sustainability. And they were like, yeah, I think that's going to cost me more. I don't want to do it. So we've not been very good storytellers, we've not been very good at understanding what the problem is and trying to solve that problem from their eyes. And we, as an industry, I think, should take some culpability in that. I don't think we've done a great job, if I'm honest. I think we're getting on top of it now. I think we're really working it out. And I look at Hoare Lea, it's the only firm I know really, and how effective we are at that storytelling and that messaging now, and it's night and day from where we used to be. But I think we've probably wasted 10 years having the right argument in the wrong context.
So that's hopefully really helpful advice for you in terms of just being passionate about sustainability isn't necessarily mean you're going to solve the problem, but the industry needs you to solve the problem. The planet needs you to solve the problem. So it's about thinking outside the box, and then that brings you back to Matt's other point about soft skills and know your client and communicate in a different way and all those sort of things. So that the threads are all linking together in a way. And that's a really good point about what you were saying earlier on, that clients sometimes, maybe even more than sometimes, they sort of broadly know what they want to achieve, but they're asking the wrong question. So instantly we're trying to respond to a question which we know is wrong, and it's not really what they want to solve, but we can't find a way through that. So the pressure's on both sides, really.
Yeah, it isn't, and I don't think. I mean, architects, people that are in architecture, generally as a rule, and this is a bit of a categorisation, tend to be better communicators, more articulate at getting a message across. If only they'd chosen the harder degree at university, then they would. But still, you never know. But perhaps architecture have maybe lost sight of the technical issues as well. I think, there was a moment, probably about 2005-ish, when sustainability could have gone one of both ways. It could have gone an engineering route, or it could have been picked up by architects. Now, weirdly, it was picked up by engineers, and I don't think that's really worked. I don't think it would have worked any better being picked up by architects, because I think that would have been the other side of the coin. It needed to be done collaboratively across the two. And I think the industry, because of the way it's set up in this sort of confrontation, when let's package everything up and make as much money as we can off everything, because it never got its act together around that, I think we've done a real... I think we might look back and think, oh, that's a bit awkward. There was a moment as an industry we really needed to get together, and we didn't, and we still haven't really. And as I say, I think we're getting much better at it. I think we are, as I say, 50% now of our bids, we talk about sustainability through the development appraisal and through the balance sheet. We try and convince people this makes financial sense. Forget the value of doing it. Let's just talk about why it makes sense for your business first.
Or the value is a given, because we know what we want to achieve.
Yeah, but we're not going to spend any more money. We're not going to spend any more money. We're smart. We can get better outcomes for you without spending any more money. And then clients can say, yeah, why wouldn't they? Of course they would.
Yeah.
We've just got, and again, that all wraps into soft skills and actually, influence and selling, and all those things become relevant. And just knowing the technical is great and it's essential and you have to have it, but I'm not sure it's going to guarantee success.
Any other questions?
Looking forward to sort of net zero targets.
Yeah.
Do you think then that the biggest limiter for reaching a net zero target is the client and their unwillingness to sort of spend on sustainability? Because I think if you look at a lot of sort of engineering design companies nowadays, especially through job applications, the big thing on their websites was our mission, sustainability.
Yeah,
you
they're
say
lying.
so many times. So do you think that that's actually sort of been bred into the engineering companies now, and now that the sort of the issue is the client's unwillingness?
I don't think either is true, unfortunately. The first thing I would say is, if I meet 1,000 people at design team meetings from all different areas, most of them don't understand net zero, don't know what it is, but know it's good and they should agree with it. And yes, net zero, net zero. I have no idea really what that means, and no idea really how to implement it on a project. I would put clients as definitely the worst offenders in that category. I won't name a university, but one that sort of might be in competition with UCL. Literally, sustainability is the most important thing to us. It's essential. We have to decarbonise our estate. Quite passionate. Okay, this is really, really good, but we're not going to spend more than £10 million a year on it. Okay, well, we'll go home then, because you're not taking this seriously. So there's lots of rhetoric that isn't backed up. So I think there's that saying, isn't there? In politics, don't take any notice of what we say, look at what we do. And again, that's where I draw contradiction out in the industry. So I could probably pick any number of big institutional clients who are all about sustainability, and then I could get their last 10 contracts that we've done with them out, put them on the table, and then show me where in that contract you're interested in sustainability. And of course there will be something around a building BREEAM excellent that they don't understand, or something else, but they're not really putting their money where their mouth is. What we would love them to do in terms of winning that is say, we're going to make this building measurable, and your fees will be directly linked to how measurable the performance of this building and how measurable it is. Because that way I would know when we put something on the table that performs well, the client's going to go for it. And we don't have to go through that rigmarole of trying to convince him. Because it's important to him. They're putting their money where their mouth is, and they're saying, we're going to put everybody's targets. We're going to incentivise everybody. The whole building will be, but nobody ever does that. So their website, so clients are going to be a big issue. And I say until they start to suffer some reputational damage, which hits them in the bottom line, we're probably going to be in this sort of greenwashing phase for a while. That's not to say all clients. Some clients, some clients are exceptional.
I was going to ask you a question before we take another one. I was going to ask you a question about whether you're an optimist or a pessimist about the future. Because I think that's, and I don't. It doesn't really matter what you say, but in terms of your answer to that. But I think it's.
There have been times where I've considered a career in politics, and I'd say I'm both an optimist and a pessimist. And, I think it's going to get a lot worse before the absolute talent in the industry, and there are thousands of great people, fantastic people, a joy to work with, but I think it's going to have to get worse before it gets better. I don't think we're at that sort of sort of paradigm shift moment when there's enough people that go, right, we're just going to have to do this differently. And once that starts to break, and once the first few companies go, I think it will then fill in really, really quickly.
So it sounds like you are an optimist.
Yeah, but it's going to get a little bit.
Yeah.
There's going to be more. It's going to get harder and harder and harder, and then it will break, and then it will get better.
You could also,
I just don't know when that's going to be. As soon as possible, but
you could also say that the people in the room here are, you know, their job really is to make that change happen.
And that's why it's sort of quite a privilege to come and be able to do these sorts of things, because you know, we really need you. We constantly need to be backfilling with, let's go over here. You know, why is this? Why is that meeting room so unpleasant? Why is that contract set? It doesn't make any sense. It needs more challenge. As I said, I think we've let the industry down a little bit because we've iterated into this place, whereas I didn't. Use your judgment, use all your people skills to challenge, but challenge in a way that's going to get the right conversation.
I just wanted to ask, like, aren't there policies in place which like enforce these things rather than being a choice, and like people definitely have to do that then?
Sorry, I couldn't quite hear that. Sorry.
No, I was asking, aren't there any policies in place for these things, so that people don't take sustainability practices as a choice rather than it's a compulsion for them to opt for it?
Policies, I think government's really done a brilliant job. It's things like sustainability. I don't think we'd be anywhere without Part L. I don't think we'd be anywhere without legislation pushing things like that. So there are bright spots of where policy forces people to do the right thing. I think companies generally are getting much more human. I think there's a lot more understanding, you know, to put our own journey around how the hierarchy works, how to get the best out of people. I think there's a lot more, definitely the industry is going that way, trying to get, you know, it's coming from a slightly old-fashioned approach to sort of sit there and do what I say, and to like how do we work together. I think that's happening within companies. I think the best job I've ever done was with Microsoft, and Microsoft, possibly this has informed some of my thinking, said we're not going to do it the way construction does it, we're going to do the way we do software. So they picked the team on day one, there was no tender, no contract, everybody came together, we had 100 people in the same room, Monday morning. There was an agenda of what we needed to design. I was an electrical engineer at the time, so for instance something like the large computer room, the small equipment rooms, and the way the data was going to work and how that was going to be backed up by the generator, all that sort of stuff. We'd scoped that out as a problem, and then myself, a guy from Microsoft, an IT expert, a generator manufacturer, and an electrical contractor would go off into a room for 2 or 3 days. We'd work out collaboratively how it should work. We'd go back on the Wednesday and like, this is what we want to do, and that was it. That's what we did. That's what we built, and it was a dream because we weren't putting anybody in a position, or the project didn't put any in a position where there had to be an argument or people had to use their personality to sort of try and influence the right thing to do. It was just such a much better way of delivering a building. And you know, relationships and friendships were formed on that job that endure now. In fact, the project manager is the godmother of my child. So, you know, those things are, you know, quite. It's just sad or regretful that that's not picked up and run by more. But that's a client. It's an informed client who Microsoft, I guess, know a thing or two about putting teams together and designing stuff, and they were like, well, we're not going to do it like that, we're going to do it like this. I know that's not how you do it, but we don't care, we're doing it like this. Yeah.
Next question.
This is a question because you were emphasizing on having the people skill and talking to clients. But like when we're starting work as an engineer, we don't really get exposed or get the chance to talk to the clients by ourselves.
No.
So is that like the business side and talking to the clients, is that something that you pick up throughout your career, or is it something that you have to learn by yourself? Or is it something that you can ask, like maybe project leaders who actually talk to the clients, that you can share with them and then see how they talk to the clients?
I mean, I think most organisations are waking up to this. I don't think Hoare Lea quite do enough of it yet. I think next year we'll be introducing quite a lot more in around soft skills.
In terms of our graduate training or your graduate training scheme,
yeah.
Right.
I think there'll be a lot more coming in on that. I would agree with what you say that in the early part of your career, you're not likely to be having that much interaction with clients, so you're not likely to need that skill. But very quickly, you will be engaging with other members of your organisation, sort of peer departments. You will, after maybe 6 months, be communicating with other companies in terms of the design team. And I think those skills they're not as important as the more strategic conversations, but you will definitely have an opportunity to start to develop and hone those skills that I think you'll very quickly find, oh, that's quite useful. Probably early in my career I was negotiating with architects around space and how we might arrange things. I probably didn't follow my own rules and was perhaps if an architect had said to me earlier on in my career, can I get this, can you make this shape or that size, I would have probably been tempted to say yeah, even though I felt maybe I'm not sure I can. That probably cost me, the firm and the project some effectiveness. I reflect on that and think actually if I'd had some better negotiation skills, some better ability to not challenge back, but get involved in, to and fro of debate, that would have served me and the project well. I used to have this phrase, I'm not sure I really agree with it, but because construction is a load of organisations that are all quite disparate coming together, it's part of its power, it's also a bit of an Achilles heel. If that bad version of me turns up too much, design is sort of the least shit compromise of everything, and I don't think any building starts out to be, this is sort of the least rubbish product we could come up with. And I think that takes a bit of bravery and a bit, so you will be in that situation quite early on. That's when you can start using those skills, pushing back, challenging nicely, trying to get people to see it your way, trying to get them to say yes to what you think is the right thing to do, trying to stand back with a sort of balcony view of what is actually the problem the project's trying to solve rather than what I'm trying to solve.
So my answer to your question, which I think was a really good question, is it's always sooner than you think you will need that skill. You're unlikely to get it on week 1 of your career, but don't wait until year 5, which is probably what I did and maybe what you did. Realise that your ability to skyrocket your effectiveness comes with grasping that early and actually trying to learn from anybody you can learn from and hone those skills. And don't be afraid about that. Everybody starts off, like you said, you were painfully shy. I was absolutely painfully shy when I started off in the industry. Everybody is really. It's about finding your way and your confidence as soon as you possibly can. So don't worry about it, but just take. One of the things I said in my talk is just take some time, all the time, to think about your career development. As in, don't take Friday off and just worry about you, but actually take some time to say, is my career going in the right direction? Do I think I'm being effective enough? Am I happy with my current employer? Am I getting the exposure to interesting projects with clients, whatever that I need to? And if not, then certainly raise that with your line manager, and then that is where you start to hone that skill set of being able to talk to somebody about something put your view across and actually challenge.
One of the things I didn't put in the little chat there was, I had this thing about when you start your organisation, try and find your person or the cohort that really works for you, because you'll have your own way, you have your own ideas and your own values. You will spot someone in your organisation that's like, I wonder how she does it, or they always seem to be giving the message that I really resonate with, or I'm inspired by that person. That hopefully you'll work at a place where you'll see those people and they'll be available to you. I would encourage you, they're not going to not be okay with you coming up to them and saying, I'm sort of loving the way you do it and the way you operate. I'd love to spend some time understanding what I can learn from you. The very, very worst outcome that you're going to get is, that's really nice of you, that's lovely, I'm really, really busy, but let me help you. Let me put you in touch with somebody that's got the time for that. Hardly any people do that. You know, if somebody comes up to me and says, "Mate, I love the way," like, you know, that's you know, we're all human, and people want to help people in our industry generally. So that sort of finding your tribe, that finding your person. I mean, Ian and I had a 25-year relationship. I was very, very lucky. I didn't really have to search for somebody that I got on with and sort of clicked with. But yeah, I would definitely advise, be proactive about that. Don't wait. If you see them, go and ask them.
Question at the front?
So, maybe I'll ask something a bit personal, since we're in the safe space.
Yeah.
And you said that you're like super honest, which is really nice. I would like to understand, like, if you were in the beginning of your career right now,
Yeah.
and you want to like start your career in this sustainability world,
Yeah.
ESG, this moment, AI, and like, what do you think will you do in this situation, and yeah, what do you think would be the best strategy, and yeah, I'd like to understand if you're in our position.
I think if you're going to see 5 different companies that are working in the field that you want to work in, if your objective is getting 5 offers, I think my advice would be to ask them, you know, outright at interview, what is the measure of success in sustainability for you as an organisation? Show that you can adapt your thinking and your approach. You're curious about what they're trying to achieve. And just simply asking that question at interview stage is likely to make the person think that's a really interesting approach. They're already thinking about how we operate, what our values are, what we're trying to achieve, and already thinking about how can I layer myself on top of that and help this organisation deliver that. So in terms of sort of getting through the door, I would, again, you know, coming back to, they'll have a load of problems in their mind, and if you can present yourself as somebody that is curious about what those problems are, is thoughtful enough to think, I want my career to be connected to you solving that. You're likely, they might go, yeah, someone else has got a slightly better degree, but I liked the way that person approached this particular challenge. So that would be about getting in the door.
What job would you choose?
What job would I choose? Landscape architect.
Why do you like plants?
Because as I get nearer to retirement, I'm sort of quite keen on my garden, and I think, oh God, I could have just been doing this for 30 years. Landscape architects get to work on all the big projects. Nobody ever questions their design. Nobody ever value engineers their stuff. It's the nicest little seam in the industry.
But does it save carbon?
No. I'm joking. It's me sort of thinking, oh, that would be nice, wouldn't it? 30 years doing that, but you'll think I'm going to think I'm a bit of if it feels like a bit of a stage question, if you want to have influence in the industry, I think engineering and M&E is where it's going to be at for the next 10, 15 years. I think throughout most of my career, M&E has been not quite the sort of, least favourite child of the design team, but it was seen as quite transactional. I think most clients have now worked out all of our problems, all of our issues. The architect can't help, structural engineer can't help. Annoyingly, the one they need in the room is the M&E engineer. And more annoyingly, most engineers get into that room, and sort of what I said earlier, well, ask me a question then and I'll give you the answer. And clients are screaming at us going, no, the reason you're here is I don't know what the answer or the question or the answer is. That's why I've got you in the room. So our lack of ability as an industry to go, okay, let's work together and see if we can work out what your problem is. It's an absolute gaping chasm, a wide open goal.
It just
but I don't want it because it's also quite a technical. For me, the exciting bit isn't the technical bit now. It's about M&E's got the most ability to solve problems, and that's kind of what.
Do you think that's an interesting whether you were thinking the same way as I am, but for a graduate joining the industry, do you see MEP as being something separate to sustainability? Because I think what you've just said is if you want to win the sustainability argument, if you want to shift the needle on zero carbon, be an MEP engineer, not join Hoare Lea to be a sustainability consultant as opposed to an MEP engineer. But those two are linked, aren't they?
I think you've got. I need to be really careful with my language, and the nuance might be lost. The environmental engineering area is where I think there's most opportunity to resolve sustainability. We, as an organisation, because of our history, sort of themed people either mechanical, electrical, or sustainability. That I wouldn't say it was a mistake, but we're now having to undo all of that and say sort of you've got to go. As somebody more in with a balcony oversight of everything that can say, well, I know enough about that, I know enough about that, I can roll that all up together and give you a solution. So I don't want to say it's sort of more of a generalist topic because that's that.
What, sustainability?
It's more. You have to be more generalist in your knowledge. Yeah. But really expert in the problem solving. And I think there is a danger that you can be super expert in your discipline, in your knowledge, and therefore it sort of it encumbers your problem solving because I need the full spectrum to be able to solve the problem, and that introduces loads of sort of resistance into the system. So I think, in terms of people who are going to be influential and make a difference, it will be definitely those people who have got a more generalist knowledge of a load of disciplines that can quickly use their people skills, roll it all up and present solutions to clients. And I think in the next 10 years that is going to be more engineering focused than maybe in the last 20 where that's been more architecturally focused. Engineers, at the start of when I joined at Hoare Lea, engineers were an afterthought. Now we are often consulted and involved before architects, which is, we're getting our head around that and getting better people skills for being in that room earlier on.
Part of the problem, I think, has been that engineers are rubbish at convincing themselves that they're of value. And I think in the absence of anybody's, almost in a way you could turn the question around and say, well, there's probably going to be, nobody has got preordained position to say, I'll take the lead in the next 10 years. Architects, engineers, clients, whatever. So in a way, it's whoever's brave enough to stand up.
I would agree with that.
And actually, if only engineers could be brave enough to stand up, they would find that they've actually got all that skill set in their toolkit to actually solve the problem. Even more than that, to actually explain to the client what the problem is they need to solve and then how we can solve it. But the problem is that until we can get that confidence level of everybody who comes in the industry upwards, then we're going to struggle.
And again, I'll sort of reflect on some of the things I said about understanding yourself. Some of the most successful design relationships I've had at work were when I worked with one or two people. A guy called Keith Horsley and a guy called Matt Finbow. Totally different to me. Absolutely complete opposite ends. And we were dynamite on projects because I think we had a wider skill set as a pair. So we might have been sort of 1 unit worth of value individually, but 10 units worth of value together. And that's sort of how I'm trying to answer that question. If you can deliver that yourself, then brilliant. That's going to require a different sort of approach and a blend of, as I say, technical expert and softer skills. Again, something I may be building on this, sort of find the person in your organisation. I'm now at a stage in my career where I've gone from being really inhibited about some of my failings to being not proud of them, but confident enough to say, well, I'm going to tell you what I'm not going to do. I'm rubbish at this, I'm rubbish at that, I won't do that. These things I'm great at and I'm not going to let you down on them. Going into the room with another person that's brilliant at all the things I'm rubbish at, I find that person where I'm not very good at this, but me and you together, we make a powerful combination. Your firm should try and put that together for you, but a load of stuff gets in the way sometimes, and I'm just sort of thinking that might be easier to say than to actually achieve, but being aware of it is, I go back to maybe working with Matt or Keith. Would I have been confident enough to say, I know you've given us this job, but I think that job will be better with, say, me and Keith on it, because I think we're a better pair than me and Mick Collins. And actually, if I'd said that, would the team lead or would the director at the time gone, oh, actually, that's a good point, yeah, you're probably right. They probably would have gone, yeah, actually, that makes a lot more sense. We'll do that. So again, I think if you can be thinking like that, I'd be confident enough. Again, that superior will be really impressed. Okay, they're really thinking about things that are really probably beyond their experience. That's quite impressive.
Okay, next question. Any other questions?
As you are working in operation part of Hoare, so you used to interact with your people and then client and also with your management.
Yeah.
So who do you think it's hard to
management?
Hard to
Hoare Lea management, without a shadow of a doubt, it's way the most difficult people.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, that's a slightly unfair. I wouldn't say that's an industry standard. I don't work anywhere else, so I can't be sure. I think Hoare Lea's had a particular journey where we've gone from a partnership to not a partnership. So we've gone from people who own the business to being employees of the business. That's just a particularly tricky journey for people to navigate. So I don't think we would be typical. You'd like to think more experienced people would be easier to get on with. For me, that's the biggest challenge. Clients are a challenge, but I say I'm probably a bit more comfortable now dealing with clients. And again, I think we've just had a big problem we've got a problem project in London massive scheme, big client, I won't mention any names, jobs £70 million over budget, a year late, not a great place to be. I got called to a meeting with their director, and again I went in and I just said, right, I'm going to tell you the absolute truth. You're going to like some of it, you're not going to like some of it, but I'm not going to pull any punches. I'll try and be polite and kind and gracious, but I'm not, I'm not going to shy away from saying anything. There were a few moments where the client was like, wow, okay. But at the end of that meeting, they said, we had every intention of starting legal proceedings with you today, but we're not going to do that. Let's work together and see if we can work our way through it. So I think if clients are fairly straightforward, if you're really honest with them. Yeah.
Okay.
Our leaders. Ian would agree with that, I'm sure.
Any other questions, or are we almost there? I had one question that I wanted to ask you, which might have been quite frightening to all these people, about the sort of honesty and trust side of things in construction. Do you just want to expand on that a little bit? I mean, it's the first time that subject has come up in these talks, and I think it's actually quite refreshing that it has come up, because not all of construction is nice, is it?
So
my question really, in terms of how you answer that, is before you answer that, really, is from these people's point of view. Of course, they don't know much about the industry. So how is there any advice you could offer them in terms of how to avoid that negative side of the industry, or at least be aware of it, or what?
I think the way projects are set up, and the money that's at stake, and the pressure that people are put under, it makes, as I said in the sort of talk, the temptation of lying, which is what it is, quite attractive. I notice politicians don't lie anymore. It was just a mistruth. You mean, okay, well, it sounded a lot like a lie to me. But so it does go on in construction. It was one of the reasons I went into contracting, and one of the reasons I got out of contracting, in that it really opened my eyes to how far people were prepared to go. And very quickly I made a decision, I'm going to stay here long enough to get the experience, but then this is not for me, this is not what I want to do. It does go on. It goes on less where where money's not involved. So on the consultancy, on the professional side, there's a bit less money involved. That's not to say it doesn't go on, but on the contracting side, where there's often millions of pounds at stake on one decision, the temptation is significant.
Are there particular sectors that you mentioned about, like commercial resi and developer-led schemes?
Yeah, I mean, definitely commercial projects where clients are building something for money. So the measure of success is how much money they make from the scheme. There's going to be more commercial pressure. As I go back to the RHS project, obviously you haven't got quite a commercial guy who's borrowed £100 million off some bank who's has got quite a lot on the line. That puts them under pressure. That pressure flows down throughout the whole project. If you're building Europe's biggest garden, they're probably not so bothered about that. So choosing the sector, you're definitely going to see more of it in the commercial area, but in any areas where the money's involved, there's going to be more of it. So you're going to be in those situations more in the QSing side of things, on the contracting side of things. If you are a supplier, a manufacturer, there's probably going to be some temptation there. As I say, we could go back to Grenfell and, I know it's an uncomfortable truth, but everyone's aware of, and that would have been beyond my experience, way beyond my experience. Just sort of outright falsification of stuff is, but it does go on. It's going on. It's happening on hundreds of projects in London right now.
Do you think, as an interesting question, do you think it's within the going back to your point about, how soon can you have the discussions about line manager and what you're doing and your career development and all that sort of stuff. Is it perfectly acceptable to say to your line manager you feel uncomfortable about working on a particular project?
Or you feel, I'm not saying that the industry will respond, but I think you're perfectly within your rights to say, I feel uncomfortable in this situation, whatever that situation is. It might be you've got that completely wrong and you're absolutely wrong, but then that's your firm's responsibility to say, okay, that's fine, I'll explain to you why that's fine. But yeah, I mean, I reflect on my career, and I won't recount some of those stories because it wouldn't be right, but I look back and think, why? I should never have done that. I should have just said, I'm not doing that. Or I'm very uncomfortable with this. Yeah, I don't, I can't, like, there's all sorts of different people out there and all sorts of different managers and all sorts of different organisations, but I think most reputable organisations have your welfare and your have a duty of care over you and would not be comfortable if you felt uncomfortable. Would go quite a long way to alleviate that situation. I certainly know we would, and we're one of a dozen M&E consultants that I would assume would be exactly the same. I'm resisting picking situations, because I could pick situations, but I don't think that's quite right.
It's not,
but,
that's not really why I asked the question yet. Okay, I'm going to ask you 3 questions for which I want you to have one-word answers.
Okay.
Only one-word answers. if I can remember what the 3 questions are, because I'm making this up as I go on. Because you've got to the end of the talks, the series of 5 talks, so I think we want to try and end on a high, but I don't want to lead the witness, as it were. So I'm going to, for the benefit of these people here, which is the future of the industry, have you enjoyed your career? One-word answer. Have you enjoyed your career?
Yes.
If you were able to start it all again, would you still come into construction?
Yes.
And do you think that the future of the industry is actually in these people's hands? They are the people who are going to make what you've just said are the sort of things that are wrong, or the things where we need to shift the dial, or where we need to make clients better, all that sort of stuff. Are they the future? Are they the people who will get us to that position?
Yes.
One-word answer.
Yes.
Well, you can have a few more on this one.
Yeah, but I mean, I just wanted to, because that deserves a bit more than a one-word answer. It's an interesting moment for the sort of generational divide in construction. And, being honest, there is a bit of tension between the values of younger people and the way they operate and the way the boomers and the Gen Xers like me operated. It's about a collaboration in those things. We are definitely not right, and we definitely, our generation, some of that traditional thinking definitely needs to be challenged. And the more and more people of your generation that I meet, the more I'm impressed. I think the quality and calibre, your thinking, your sort of critical analysis, your maturity is sort of unrecognisable from when I was your age. I think you're an immeasurably better crop of people. So I think if you can have the grace to listen to advice, ignore some of it, but at least ask and listen, and then combine that with your own values and abilities, I think it'll be fine.
Brilliant. In which case, thank you very much. Thank you, everybody.
Cheers, thank you.